Hey, folks, Zach Osterman here. Oh, I think I started early. Hey, folks, Zach Osterman here, IU Insider, Indianapolis Star. This is Mind Your Banner for Tuesday, December 17th, 2024. Apologize for our relative radio silence last week. Needless to say, my house was a quarantine zone of daycare flus and stomach bugs and God knows what else. But we are emerging the other side, and we are doing so very pleased to be joined by a special guest, Mike Berardino, who covers Notre Dame for the Star, for the South Bend Tribune, basically for all of Gannett. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. I'm glad we're not in the same room after that intro.
Yeah, well, I'm feeling better now. Trust me, if you found me like Thursday, Friday of last week, it wasn't a pretty sight, but I'm doing better now.
Good to hear.
Obviously, it is a big week, Mike. I know you were on Marcus Freeman's Zoom, you were there in person. I was on Marcus Freeman's Zoom on Sunday. I don't know if you caught Curt Cignetti's press conference Monday, but either way, the point is everybody's talking because it is IU Notre Dame on Friday night. First game of the first year of the 12-team college football playoff. First time these two teams have met in more than 33 seasons. And I think on both sides, it's fair to say a really big game. Playoff obviously is always going to be big. For Indiana, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's the best season in program history. They're trying to keep it going as long as they can. For Notre Dame, I think there's a genuine path to a national championship game appearance here. I guess the first question I have is, just from your perspective, a season that obviously kind of spikes early with the Texas A&M game. Then there's the craziness of the Northern Illinois loss. And then what is it now? 10 straight wins. Just how do you what's the elevator speech that you give people when they ask, like, how you've watched this Notre Dame team kind of navigate a season that it seemed for a little while there was going to be kind of choppy and swing back and forth, but really has kind of found its stride?
Well, I would take the stairs, Zach. I would take the stairs on that one. But depending on how many flights we're looking at. But yeah, 10 games in a row. This is somewhat, I think there's so many similarities, but I'm a newbie to the Indiana story of football this year because I really wasn't paying that close of attention. I think I was among the many who kind of underestimated them. And I was not surprised that Ohio State took care of them the way it did, just from afar, because I got my nose buried in Notre Dame stuff. But so many similarities in terms of the schedule, relative schedule weakness. That was brought up every Tuesday night on the college football playoff Ward Manual Power Hour, and rightfully so. And then the things that they both do well, which lead to winning, are like right there in the rankings. Right down to turnover, takeaway margin, and taking the ball away, not giving it away, scoring defense, scoring offense. They're in a very select group of that sort of balance. And even, you're looking at the best pass efficiency defense in the country 2 years running for Notre Dame, going up against the most efficient pass offense out of the blue at Indiana. And then Indiana, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't so great at running the ball. Notre Dame's not so great at stopping the run. And Notre Dame's great at running the ball. That's their identity, is to pound it with the multiple backs, especially Jeremiah Love, who is healthy, it appears. We got a little look at practice, about 25 minutes of the start of a practice, and he seemed to be moving just fine after leaving the USC game with a leg injury. But yeah, that's even an example where Indiana, that's maybe the matchup, is Indiana's run defense against Notre Dame's ability in the inclement weather, possibly, to pound the rock. Will Notre Dame be able to keep the chains moving, to just impose its will, as it has on so many mid-level to lightweight teams based on how they played this year? Don't look at the names, look at the actual product that was on the field across from them. And it was a 10-game winning streak that was accomplished without having to beat anybody better than Notre Dame to this point. Here's one where they're very evenly matched.
You talk about that there, and I mean, God knows what the weather's going to be. We both know how
Sure.
quickly the forecast can change in that part of the state at this time of year. But in terms of just the on paper matchup, I mean, something that struck me since really even before this was all announced, and as an Indiana beat writer, I'm looking at, would Indiana go to Athens, South Bend, Austin, whatever. This has always felt like such a strength on strength game. And you talked about it there. Notre Dame runs the ball so well. Indiana has not necessarily faced a team that was intentional about including its quarterback in the run game as Notre Dame is, and has not faced it's faced quarterbacks that maybe would hurt you if you let them break contain, or, would occasionally scramble if the pocket just kind of opened up that way, but not somebody that's a true sort of dual threat the way Riley Leonard is. But Indiana has been so good stopping the run this season, so good in things like havoc rate and tackles for loss, and the ability to kind of control the line of scrimmage and cause disruption there. And then on the other side, as you talk about, Notre Dame, not just this year, but the last 2 years, has been one of the best pass defenses in the country. And you've got an Indiana team that will run the ball, they'll run the ball for balance. They don't tend to they don't tend to go into games saying we're going to win this game on the ground. Now, maybe that's different. Maybe they prepare a little differently depending on the weather, but Curt Cignetti said many times it's a passing offense. You've got an incredibly efficient pass offense that can be very explosive in Indiana against a Notre Dame pass defense that's been together for a little while and had a ton of success. Two teams that turn other teams over and don't turn the ball over themselves. I mean, I'm just curious for kind of your perspective, or maybe the way this has all been digested up in South Bend, because to me it is so hard to parse a game where, when I'm looking at the two teams on the eye test and when I'm looking at the two teams in the numbers, I don't see an obvious place that one or the other can, other than maybe just kind of the question of the talent disparity between Notre Dame and Indiana after that Ohio State game and what happened to IU and Columbus. And then, of course, I guess home field. I don't see a place where I can just kind of drive a natural wedge into this matchup and say, this team might struggle to stop that, and that might be, the problem that ultimately causes them the game. There is just a lot of strength on strength in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about the aspect of transfers the other day. I believe in the Sunday paper, but the fact that, of course, in the first year, this should have been a transitional year for Indiana among many in its history, but Cignetti brought so many, 13 guys from James Madison with him, and was able to plug them in effectively, as well as another, just over and over. I mean, so many, 31 total guys, I guess, were brought in by transfer. So many of them are in the two deep. So many of them are playing at a Big Ten level that if I'm looking for an advantage, if we're splitting hairs, the idea is that Notre Dame is dealing with, by and large, top level, top 10 recruiting class kind of guys who have been here for multiple years. Although there's a number of freshmen who will factor in this. The left tackle, Anthony Knapp, one of the two starting cornerbacks, probably the best of the cornerbacks now that Benjamin Morrison is out for the year and has been since midseason, Leonard Moore. And there's others. Bryce Young, Bryant Young's son, is a game wrecker as a reserve defensive end, and they'd use him on special teams. And people who saw the Purdue game, there was a play in a 66. It's amazing the teams, to jump around, the teams are so evenly matched that even the Purdue whipping was pretty much cut and paste. It was 66-0 or 66-7. Bryce Young at Purdue way back in week 3 blew up one of the Purdue blockers on a kickoff return, where he kind of just ran right by the guy who had the ball and just decided, this is my lane. I will destroy this lane. And he's done that repeatedly. He blocks punts and kicks. But if there's an advantage in terms of how you handicap this, it's that Notre Dame's coming at it with a group that is used to expectation annually, that was sought out by and recruited by pretty much everybody, by and large, before they landed here, and also has this 10-game winning streak where it feels like the lesson that was learned is so far back there, they have to be reminded regularly by Marcus Freeman to keep that pain. I don't know that Indiana has to be reminded to keep the pain of Ohio State, and when they do, remember just so recently what it was like to get trounced on the road by a more storied opponent, more highly regarded opponent. Is that a useful mental exercise going into this spot? I'm not sure that it is.
I wanted to ask you about the function of the offense because it's one of the great difficulties of being a college football reporter is you're sometimes limited in how much other college football you get to see by your own work and your travel schedule and whatever. But I mean, I think Riley Leonard's body of work obviously speaks for itself. Kurt Cignetti actually talked this week about how he's even familiar with Leonard from Leonard's time at Duke because Cignetti's just kind of a film junkie. And, last season he was watching a lot of what Duke was doing with Riley Leonard. And obviously now he's very familiar with what he's doing at Notre Dame. You've got two backs there that are both pretty explosive, both average more than 7 yards a carry. You talk about Love is kind of the number one. It sounds like he's healthy for this game. Leonard, obviously, again, 14 touchdowns on the ground. That's not a by accident number. Sometimes a quarterback can get, 5 or 6 just because they kind of get some good read packages installed in the red zone. 14 is a quarterback that knows how to run the football. But from your perspective, how does this offense operate on a functional level? Because I asked, we don't get to talk to Indiana's coordinators very often. And we talked to Brian Haynes for the first time Monday since the preseason. And one of the things I asked him was basically, when people talk about preparing for the triple option, and I know that's an extreme example of this, they always talk about how it's helpful to have an extra week if you can get it, because there's just so much to simulate that is unusual. There's so much to replicate in practice settings that you just can't get in 3 or 4 days of prep. I'm curious from your perspective, just like the function of that offense, what makes it work? How much of it is sort of Leonard's ability to make decisions and make the right reads, and just how explosive, can it get? Because again, I mean, you got two backs. It's not by accident when high major running backs average 7 yards per carry. I mean, that's a big number.
Yeah, I mean, it's Jadarian Price is the other guy, and makes the most of his touches. They've done a great job. Dylan McCullough, as you know from IU days, is the running backs coach and associate head coach here, and reportedly interviewing for the Ohio U job, and he's certainly well overdue for a head coaching job somewhere. But these guys in that running back room, there's a reason that they could survive the loss of a guy like Audric Estime to the NFL, and come back with a group that's even coached up a freshman in Aeneas Williams, a kid from Hannibal, Missouri, and he put up with my preseason questions about what it was like to be from Mark Twain's hometown. But this guy is the third down back, and it's because he's got great hands, and he's just got here. He's a freshman, and he's tremendous in blitz pickup. That's all Dylan McCullough stuff. Their traits that they demand, the standard they demand, and these guys are good, and they don't put the ball on the ground very often. And if they do, they're not really brought back in the game that day. But what makes the offense work? Mike Denbrock, people will know, may know that he's on his third tour of duty at Notre Dame. Most recently, he was at LSU with Brian Kelly. Jaden Daniels goes from a guy who was pretty scatter-armed at Arizona State and just a little more than just a guy when he got to LSU. And by the second year with Denbrock, he's the Heisman winner and pretty much unstoppable. And that understanding of football has taken him on to the NFL, where he looks like he's going to be a long-time star. Denbrock's really good. He's had to do all that, though. He had 2 years with Jaden Daniels. Here, obviously, he's had 1 season with Riley Leonard and didn't really have him in the spring because Leonard had a second procedure on the ankle that it was Howard Cross of Notre Dame that blew up that ankle a year ago at Duke. So limited time. It's all been progression from August. Had him pretty much uninterrupted since August. And Riley Leonard will tell you publicly, he says, he's never had this much confidence as a decision maker, as a guy running an offense, even though he's just entering game 13 in the Mike Denbrock system. And at max, he's going to get 16 of those games. So the learning curve had to be sharpened. And he's still prone, as the USC game showed, he's still prone to the what the heck was that throw? They cannot afford one of those, where he has to grab his helmet. He has to. You can't have that because he threw the ball in a place that it just should not have been directed. But yeah, the giveaways would be a bad idea. But I really think the worse the weather, the colder the conditions, the harder it is to throw, the better it is for Notre Dame, because their passing offense, while capable of getting separation and capable of Mitch Evans at tight end, has looked a lot better the last few weeks, a year removed from ACL surgery. Took him a while to fully get the burst that he had in the past, because he's a freakish athlete as well. But he seems to be back. But those receivers, too many drops. Wrote about that this week. This receiving group up there in the 20-plus dropped passes on the year. And Bo Collins, the Clemson transfer, who can make a contested catch. Big guy. You guys, Indiana has small corners. Notre Dame had some big receivers. Should be an advantage for Notre Dame, but you got to get the separation somewhere in there, at least get the leverage. And he can't drop the ball. So I don't know. Mike Denbrock would say it's still an offense with its best days ahead of it, but obviously it's all survive and advance now.
How much and you talk about Leonard still hasn't, to be fair, I think a lot of college quarterbacks do, or if you're a Falcons fan and you watch Kirk Cousins, a lot of NFL quarterbacks do, have moments where, they sail a throw, they send one that you just think, oh, you got away with that. But how much has he kind of grown into, especially you talked about he was limited in spring. He's had to kind of find his way into this offense. But you look at some of the numbers that Notre Dame's put up the last few weeks, especially you think about that USC game, which turns into a little bit of a shootout. And I think that if Indiana fans had known they were playing Notre Dame before that USC game, they might have thought, if we can get the points rolling, maybe Notre Dame might struggle a little bit to kind of keep up. And I know Notre Dame scores a defensive touchdown in that game, I think.
Two pick sixes, Zach. And I'll just interject, there's been 6 defensive touchdowns on the year, 5 pick sixes and a fumble recovery, which is outrageous. And it skews, and it's also outrageous that you're scoring offensive totals that are considered, that everyone quotes, include those defensive scores. That annoys me. But anyway.
But that's still 35, offensive points after 35 points against Virginia, after 49 against Army, after 52 against Florida State, after 51 against Navy. And I know you talked about, some of those teams, maybe the name on the uniform doesn't convey the difference in quality of the opponent. But my point is, this is still an offense that seems to be playing, at least in the most basic raw way, which is the one that matters most, which is points on the board, some of its best football at the right time of year. How have you seen Leonard kind of grow into what Denbrock asks of him and what, basically this offense needs from him? Because, as you said, he kind of had to ease into it slowly in the spring and early summer.
Yeah, they had to, one of their routines, I believe, they've talked about is early in the week, they'll get together early morning, bagels and coffee, just in Denbrock's office, and just talk and just get a familiarity with each other. That's the life of the transfer quarterback, and there's so many of them. But if you don't have trust and understanding and can finish the sentences of your coordinator and the coordinator yours, you will fail with all the challenges ahead for a quarterback. So they've been able to bridge that gap. I'm looking back at my opening drive stats of each half, and I think this might be symbolic of the growth. It's now 5 straight games with the scripted first possession of a game, largely scripted, that Notre Dame has opened with a touchdown, and 5 out of 6 out of 7 games that they've come out of the halftime break, perhaps even more significant because the fur is flying. You get that little brief halftime break in and out. 6 out of 7 times Notre Dame's opened the second half with a touchdown. So, you're just looking not to go 3 and out sometimes, but in one of these where you can set their tone setters, right? So pair that with a defense that does not allow very many scores at all. I believe it's something like 24 out of 26 games now that Notre Dame had USC got one on them coming out of the break. So that was really rare. It's just happened 3 times in the last 2+ seasons for against Al Golden's defense. And anyway, Riley Leonard seems to know where the ball should go. He's doing a much better job. It seems like they allow him to check into run plays or check out of whatever is coming through that headset until they cut it off at 15 seconds. And he's showing the ability to do that in a way that Sam Hartman a year ago never really had that, with a different coordinator and without the helmet headset. So Leonard, sometimes the best check he can make is out of a pass play that may not appear to be available as they might have hoped it was, but based on how Indiana would line up, and then check into something where he just tucks it and goes, because he does have wiggle. He is a freak athlete himself, former basketball player, 360 dunk guy, supposedly. And he's tough. So he'll put his shoulder down and he'll get the extra yards, and he'll smell the goal line, and he'll get you that. I mean, the way back at A&M, you remember, you may have seen this clip where they went for it back-to-back plays, 4th down on the first drive of the second half. And they ended up turning it over on downs around midfield because of 4th and 1. He was stopped, Riley Leonard was. But in the midst of the play, after his forward progress had been stopped, he's got the ball in one hand. He's got about 5 or 6 A&M guys trying to punch it out, and he's signaling first down. Was that wise? Probably not. But it was that kind of the swagger that you were looking for in a quarterback, and his teammates are looking, well, who is this guy? He took some shots in that game. There was a targeting call at the very beginning against A&M and an ejection on a helmet-to-helmet shot on a sliding Riley Leonard. So he's taken shots over the course of the year. Tough, durable, not the most accurate passer. The ball will go astray at times, and that's where less will be more.
Flipping to defense before we kind of wrap up, Howard Cross, it sounds like by all accounts is back for this game. That gives Notre Dame its top 2 interior linemen. Cross has been really solid when healthy this season. Riley Mills, at least by the PFF grades, maybe Notre Dame's best pass rusher in addition to being a 6'5", 295-pound tackle, which, kind of speaks for itself. And I think, there is a lot of justifiable discussion of that secondary, which I think is really good, led by Xavier Watts. But I think when I look at this from Indiana's perspective, I'm curious just what you think of Notre Dame's kind of front 6 and what Howard Cross's return means, because that has been the area where, Indiana had basically that 6-quarter stretch of the second half against Michigan and then the Ohio State game, where for the most part, they just could not control the line of scrimmage or even hold their own. And listen, Michigan might have had one of the best defensive fronts in the country with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and all that. And Ohio State and Columbus is going to be difficult. And Indiana's kind of adamant that it fixed the problems from that day, primarily that it had to go to the silent count, but then Ohio State figured out what the signal was and timed it all up. But to me, if I'm looking at, we talked about all the strength on strength. If I'm looking at an area where I'm just not sure exactly what Indiana's going to look like, it's dealing with a big, physical, NFL talented defensive line and defensive front. And Cross's return, provided he's full go, provided he's not limited, is a really big one for me. I'm just curious from your perspective, what that kind of Notre Dame front six looks like and how important Cross is to get back into that mix for a game like this.
Well, I think a lot of Howard Cross. I've enjoyed watching him play here for the 6 years. He's a great interview, and he showed that again this week. He's very insightful, but he knows better than anyone that this is a guy who came back along with Mills, not just to pad any stats or improve any draft stock, because the draft stock was pretty solid, I believe, for both, and probably, if anything, dips for Cross coming off of an injury-marred season, because he really didn't do much in August with a hamstring issue. So just by the PFF stats, which are not gospel, but I don't grade the film, so I go by this, and fans like it. But among defensive interior guys, you could make the case this is Howard Cross's shakiest season since he came back, or since he became a regular several years ago. And he's like, his run defense grade, he's tied for 184th in the country. His overall defensive interior defensive grade is tied for 107th. His pass rushing is the thing that's carried through. He's tied for 32nd, and a lot of that was just against Stanford. One of those, again, name on the front of the jersey, check your local listings. But Howard Cross can blow up a plan when healthy, when able to push off, because he will be double teamed. So that's 600 pounds of bulk leaning against the guy who's undersized to begin with an ankle that hasn't been tested in a game, a high ankle sprain, hasn't been tested in 6 weeks in a game. So the first job one is just stay and make it through the first quarter, because he hasn't played since the second quarter of Florida State. Riley Mills is tremendous as well, but a bit erratic. He's been a lot better second half of the season in terms of that interior disruption. And, you can really make the case that if you can blow up the interior, you can get pressure up the middle, as those two guys can do. It's almost more valuable than having a freak edge rusher, because you can go the other side of the field against that guy. You can look the other way. You can roll, you can move the pocket. If you're getting penetration and disruption up the middle, as Cross and Mills can do. And they can send the linebackers. They can send sometimes Jack Kaiser's inside, sometimes Drake Bowen's inside, former Indy star, Mr. Football, both of them. They also can come on the blitz and have the athletic ability to get to the quarterback. They do not have Kingston Viliamu-Asa, and I wanted to say that on your show because I've been working on pronouncing it all year. It's an awesome name, and it's even harder to spell. But they don't have him, and they won't have him most likely as far as this postseason goes for Notre Dame. And he was another freshman who played right out of the gate from game one at A&M. Not every snap, but a tremendous pass rusher, a weapon off the edge as a linebacker. And he had an ACL, it appeared, against Army. But they won't make that official because they hold out hope. This thing's not going to be completely done till January 20th for two lucky teams. And there will be some luck involved, some good fortune along the way. But Howard Cross, very important piece here. I'd also say Christian Gray was lit up, Zach, lit up at USC, made up for it all, wiped out the worst game of his college career. He's only a sophomore. With the 99-yard pick six when USC was in the red zone and nearly in the red zone and about to apparently tie the game. So how will Christian Gray respond with a potent passing attack? If you just assume that the ball's flying and weather's not an issue and Indiana's efficient pass offense can still be what it's been throughout the year, that could be a problem even for the nation's top-ranked pass efficiency defense 2 years running, because guess what? Ben Morrison was a big part of that for a year and a half, but not since Georgia Tech this year. So yeah, it's a fascinating matchup. I'm looking forward to it. I think that it will, as we're trained to believe, that it'll turn on 3 to 5 pivotal plays at some point, and you just hope it's not a fluky thing. Whatever it is, either way, you hope that it's these are two great teams. Neither deserves to go home after this one, after this season, but you hope that it's one without some blown call or some blindness in the replay review booth, which tends to happen in college ball, and let's see what happens.
We'll leave it there. We didn't even get to that secondary, but I know you and I have both got long weeks ahead, and the Friday game only compresses the time in which we have to get everything done. So we will let you go, Mike. Thank you so much, Mike Berardino, for joining us. A man who might know Aaron Slagers even better than IU baseball fans do.
Right.
He's Mike Berardino. Notre Dame Insider, I guess. They always ask me like if I'm am I IU reporter, IU Insider. I was just kind of leave that up to somebody else to label me. But the point is, knows this team as well as anybody.
I like football. Yeah, I think it's pretty. Yeah, it's our job to do that. I think for me, I focus on the football. So Notre Dame football writer is good by me. But there's elements. You got to do it all. Videographer, podcaster, whatever's required. But yeah, it's our job to know. Mainly, it's my job to know how to pronounce Kingston Viliamuasa, and I've got it. And Junior Tui Halamaka. I got that too, and he's good. Viper.
I for like 3 years thought I was pronouncing Sia Nafangatoa's name correctly, and I was not.
Ooh.
So that was a tough day when I realized just how wrong I'd been and just how long I'd been wrong. He's Mike Berardino. I'm Zach Osterman. Thank you all. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. Thank you all so much for listening. Mike Neislick and I will be back with I think in all likelihood, our live Mind Your Banners tomorrow, Wednesday, December 18th. Obviously look for the link to that sometime probably early afternoon. But until then, for the Indianapolis Star, thank you so much for listening. We will talk.